Hi, today I'm going to talk about a great film, Becket. Oh, I've thought of a couple of other films we can discuss too. Good. I find myself in one of those positions that Dr. Shin delights to put me in, and I delight to be in too, namely not very prepared, so I don't know where this is going to go, but I know the film well, or pretty well anyway. The film is based on a French play. As far as I know, Jean Ennui, Anouilh, strange name, probably from Bretagne. Anyway, and for him it was mainly political, and so it belongs in a class along with Antigone, that is, not literally, but what it can be made to say, with some distortion and so forth. But anyway, it's all based on historical events in a very general way, and it's a truly great film. I think it was made in about 1960 to 1962, around there. Stars Peter O'Toole, who is such a wonderful actor of Lawrence of Arabia and The Lion in Winter, so great. And an even greater actor, Richard Burton. Burton was a Shakespearean actor, also the husband of Elizabeth Taylor in a very publicized relationship, but he was a great, great actor. Anyway, these two together, wow. Okay, historical events. Remember that 1066 is arguably the key event in British history. I think the Brits might not appreciate that, but they maybe see it that way. Anyway, 1066 is the date of the Norman conquest of England. That's when William, Duke of Normandy, claimed the English throne. The king, Edward the Confessor, died. The barons of England overlooked William's claim and chose Harold to be new king, and William arranged for the military invasion, conquest really, of England. He crossed the British Channel, the English Channel, and the date is, I think, October 14th. So, today? Oh my God, today or tomorrow? No, tomorrow. Interesting. There took place the famous Battle of Hastings. It must not have been a very big or great battle, but Harold was up in York, 300 miles away, had to rush down with his army, and probably they were pretty exhausted. And the two forces met at Hastings in southern England near the coast. The Normans, who were great fighters and great warriors, converted Vikings after all. Maybe I'll tell that story too. In the 8th century, 7th and 8th century, the Vikings from Scandinavia every year raided, in the spring usually, many places, looted, killed, and so forth, especially the French coast. And over the years, since they didn't find much on the French coast, since everyone was terrified of them, they came more and more inland, following the rivers, like the River Seine, the Seine River, which goes through Paris. Eventually, they were coming pretty close to Paris. The Île-de-France, a very central, small region of France, the center of France. The king of France then really was just the king of the Île-de-France. He was a feudal, F-E-U-D-A-L, lord, to whom other aristocrats owed fealty, F-E-A-L-T-Y, or had to say, "Hi, king, bow the knee," and so forth. Anyway, so the king, then king of France, I don't remember, but around 770, decided to make a deal with these Vikings. Look, be our friends. Take Normandy. Here's a big section of land on the coast. It's yours. Settle there and become French citizens. Well, they did this. The Normans did this. The Vikings did this. And so Normans, Norsemen, took over Normandy, settled there, and over the next couple of hundred years became pretty faithful and very vigorous French citizens, by far the best soldiers of the time. And they conquered Sicily and various other places. Okay, that's where the Normans came from. So William, Duke of Normandy, a very powerful French aristocrat, invaded. Okay, and the Normans took over. Now getting to the time of our movie. That was 1066. The time of our movie is 1171, around there. So barely 100 years later. The French king was Henry II, and he was important in many ways. A typical Norman king, always eager for conquest and fighting, got involved in the Crusades, which had started in 1095, and his son, Richard the Lionhearted, would be one of the key figures in the Third Crusade. But anyway, blah, blah, blah. Henry always needed money to fight his wars. He taxed his barons, B-A-R-O-N-S, as much as he could, but he had to be careful with them. And so always he wanted to tax the church. But the church was always a problem, because the church owned huge tracts of land, but the church was protected from taxation by being the church. And of course, it's a typical struggle for power between the state and the church. And the church always had to fear excommunication by the Pope if the church adopted strong-armed tactics if the state adopted strong-armed tactics against the church. So this was Henry's dilemma. Now Henry's main advisor was Becket, Thomas A. Becket, who was a Saxon, because of course when the Normans took over, they took over from the Anglo-Saxons, the Angles and the Saxons and the Jutes, these Germanic tribes which had settled there in the 5th century. Becket was a Saxon, educated, but of course the Norman barons hated him and distrusted him. But Henry used him for political purposes because at least he felt he could trust him more. And they were young men, and they had many adventures together, sexual and drinking bouts and all that, and spent all night, sometimes sleeping in a barn in the film, seducing some girl or something, laughing and boyish humor. Okay. The drama with the church grows more intense, and then suddenly the Archbishop of Canterbury dies. The Archbishop of Canterbury is traditionally, was and still is, the most powerful ecclesiastical figure in England. Then in the Catholic Church, of course, now in the Church of England, Anglican Church. Okay, well, the Archbishop of England died, and the charming scene where Henry says to Becket, oh my God, I don't understand it. I'm suddenly becoming very clever. I've had an idea. I can't stand it. What's happened to me? I'm becoming clever. Because a lot of humor of the film, and the film is wonderfully humorous, is aimed at the Normans. The Normans are depicted as kind of brutes. And Becket, in one humorous earlier scene, introduces to Henry the fork. It's a very refined, un-Norman instrument, he says. Refined, un-Norman. If it were refined, it could not be Norman. The Byzantines had used it. Well, what do you use it for? Well, you pierce your meat and you bring it to your mouth. Well, I don't understand. Why can't one use one's hands? It's refined. Well, I don't see the point, but I'll try it. Says, just wonderful interplay between Becket and Henry. between Burton and O'Toole, just immortal. Okay, so now back to this idea. Oh my God, I've had this idea. I'm a Norman king. How could I have an idea? But Thomas, I have an idea. What is it, my lord? I must name a new Archbishop of Canterbury. Yes, you must. Well, the new Archbishop of Canterbury, will be you, Thomas. What? Well, no, that's impossible. That's terrible. That's a terrible idea. No, of course. And you, my friend, will help me in my dealings with the church. You, as the head of the church. Well, don't do this. Don't do this. This is a terrible idea. Now we must look back. We have seen, from time to time, we get these glimpses earlier in the film of a spiritual vacuum in Thomas. Thomas is a deep spiritual being who is kind of in despair, I think. He's kind of in despair. And at one point, the arbitrary nature of royal power is played cruelly, because actually the King Henry is deep too. But the deepest need of Henry is for a friend. The deepest need of Thomas is for God. Only God could fill his vacuum. And here's the conflict. Earlier we'd all seen another scene. Thomas has a mistress, a Welsh woman, beautiful, beautiful creature, who sings, this is taken from Shakespeare's Henry IV, Part 1, who sings these songs in Welsh, Celtic language, of such beauty. We don't understand, but it's just so beautiful, and she is so beautiful. And Thomas loves her. As much as he can love a woman, he loves her. But Thomas annoys Henry at one point, and Henry, in a drunken moment, comes to see Thomas at night and basically says, "You're my friend, right? Yes. You'll do anything for me? Yes, you're my king. Lend me your woman for the night." Thomas agrees. She, brilliant, knows that when she returns, Thomas, will never touch her again, will not be able to overcome his aversion for her, but what can he do? So Henry has forced this to happen, and it shows how arbitrary, how willful, how spoiled, boyish, childish royal power could be. Whimsical. And Becket knew this, of course, had known this, but now he saw it and felt it deeply. But still, just to be sure, that we had seen earlier that that vacuum in Becket could only be filled by death or God. And so this glimpse of the arbitrary power of royalty, although it had an effect on him, on Becket, perhaps even a bigger effect than the film is made to show. Burton is so... he's a giant. On the screen, he's a giant. I don't know that we have a giant like him. There's no giant like him. Not the only comparable one is Russell Crowe. Russell Crowe is a little bit comparable. It takes a non-American accent too, maybe, to be so imposing a figure. Russell Crowe plays Americans. Seriousness, that is, the seriousness of his face, the power and depth of character that the face shows. I'm not sure that we Americans generate those faces. There aren't many Native Americans who have faces like that. Perhaps you'll agree if you get to see the film. But if you think of Russell Crowe, and then you compare him with, I don't know, some younger man, Brad Pitt, who's maybe a great actor, or older even, Al Pacino. No, Russell Crowe's face is deeper and more powerful, and Burton's was even more powerful than Russell Crowe's. Anyway, sorry. Moving on. Then we had these glimpses before, and then Becket has, Henry has this idea. You will be, Thomas, my Archbishop of Canterbury. And when Becket says, don't do this, don't do this, there's fear in his eyes. Fear of what? We don't understand at the time, but it's before long we do understand. Because it's kind of the fear of what the consequences are bound to be. Because the consequence, and I guess Thomas knows it, or he intuits it, intuition. He knows that if he's called to this life of service to God, this life of Archbishop of Canterbury, he will not turn back. He will not go into this in any half-hearted way. He's incapable of that. He will pour his whole being into the pursuit of that life. And that will put him on a collision course, of course, with Henry, his friend. That will hurt Henry. He doesn't want to hurt Henry, but he knows that he will have to. He will have no choice. Henry doesn't see this, because the height to which Henry can reach is friendship. And he idealizes the friendship with Thomas so greatly. His marriage, by the way, is shown as utterly trivial. He treats his wife with contempt. He treats his children with contempt. Marriage for him is nothing. Being King of England, even, is a small thing compared with the degree to which he idealizes that friendship with Thomas. Amazing, amazing. Okay, so, but Henry insists they go through with it. And soon, Henry leaves him alone for a while, but soon he hears these rumors about Thomas having sold all the gold plate, all the silver, all the treasures of the church at Canterbury, and distributing money, food, to the poor. Now, Henry, of course, is a king, and Henry, of course, is cynical. How could a king not be cynical? And Henry thinks, oh, that Thomas, that wag, is what he would say, W-A-G, kind of like a witty prankster playing pranks. But Henry, I think, knows that there's more. There's more. But he leaves him alone for a while. But soon, of course, he has to call upon the church for money. He needs money. And Thomas is not there. There is no money left, or not what Henry needs anyway. And soon this collision course is evident, even to Henry, who didn't want to see it. Now, for us watching the film, let's step back from the film a little bit. That scene, the powerful scene when drunken king, staggering, had insisted that Thomas yield his woman, this beautiful, gentle, supreme woman. Can't think of anything comparable in any film. Or, I mean, she's just perfection. She is so beautiful, so gentle, devoted to Becket. By the way, she understands Becket. She understands him better than Thomas does, because she sees that vacuum in Thomas more clearly than Henry can. Probably she has seen him in more vulnerable times as a woman. She has seen him more vulnerable, and she sees the aching longing for something more than human in Thomas. She sees that. Henry doesn't see that. That's not Henry's fault, maybe. Anyway, my point is to speculate for a moment. The film lets us speculate on what really happened in that scene. Because what really Henry did was he took away from Becket that night. He took away from Becket the only human being who could possibly a little bit have filled that vacuum in Thomas. She couldn't have filled it completely, but she could have filled it a little bit. And what Henry did was snatch that away from him, from Becket. Sully it, S-U-L-L-Y. Taint it, make it dirty. And spoil it, ruin it, snatch it away from him. And so, is it possible that when Becket does what he does, he's in a sense striking back at Henry the only way he can, but a very huge way? I'm not sure that the film excludes that possibility. That possibility remains. From a secular point of view, okay, from the religious point of view, you can see the film is very religious, though it never pushes too far, as I'll show you. But for a person who rejects a religious interpretation for a psychological interpretation and a secular psychological interpretation, that interpretation is available to us by the pain that Henry inflicted on Becket that night in his drunken spitefulness. Okay, and self-indulgence. Okay, back to the film. So, the crisis is on. More glimpses of Henry in isolation, because Henry, of course, lives in London, and Thomas is down there in Canterbury. The distance was only 60 to 70 miles, but that's a long 60 to 70 miles, and Henry never went there. Now, I'm not sorry, this impromptu way that Dr. Schinner and I have of doing things here. I have to take you back to the beginning, the very beginning of the film. I'd forgotten this, but it doesn't matter. You'll see it right away. The opening scene has Henry at Canterbury, arriving at Canterbury, entering the church, waving to the crowd, hooray, long live the king, and all that. He enters the church, goes downstairs into the crypt, that kind of basement there, secret place really, crypt, hidden, removing his shirt, removing his royal shirt as sarcastic and humorous every moment of the way. He's Peter O'Toole, a genius. Irony written all over his face as he does this. He takes off his shirt, bows down, and kneels down and holds on to like a chest. Meanwhile, the monks of the church start administering the whip to him, and Henry, wincing in pain, but laughing ironically too, talking to Becket. Becket's dead. Becket is dead. Why is Henry the King doing this? Why is Henry the King submitting to this? Because, of course, Becket was killed by Henry's thugs, Henry's henchmen. The film consists entirely in Henry's narration of the events that took place. Deliciously witty, naughty, witty, wonderful. Henry, Peter O'Toole, narrates the events in retrospect. And of course the film will end with Henry having finished with his lashes, his back a little bloody, no doubt, doing penance, of course, for the terrible sin of having murdered Thomas. But of course all this is politics. Henry is not doing penance. Henry is simply trying to ingratiate himself, re-ingratiate himself with the English people, especially those of Canterbury, who hate him now because he killed their little saint. Because Thomas, of course, was very quickly canonized, made a saint, after his murder, after his martyrdom. A martyr. M-A-R-T-Y-R. Okay, sorry, but now you see the film in a slightly different perspective, but really it doesn't change much, except that it's Henry who is narrating these events with irony and a sense of naughty sarcasm about everything, including even his own pain. Because why is he doing this? He appears to be doing this. Look, my people, I'm truly sorry that I am at all related to, am at all guilty for guilty of the martyrdom of my great friend Thomas. But really, of course, he's only doing this for political reasons, of course. But he is so complex, and Thomas is so complex, that there are many levels at the same time. And really, human beings are that complex, though art seldom captures that. We live on many levels at the same time. A spiritual dimension, no doubt. A carnal, physical dimension, no doubt. A political dimension, no doubt. And these are simply our names, crude and general, that allow us to understand somewhat what we are and what we do at any moment of our lives. A great film like this, I think, makes such an interpretation very believable, though in the end it's only an interpretation. I'll repeat that for a moment. The film makes clear in such great characters that we human beings, like them, the film makes explicit what we often don't realize, I would say anyway, that we live on several levels at the same time. A spiritual level, dimly aware of God, dimly aware of our moral obligations, dimly aware that we fall short of our moral obligations, dimly aware of our imperfections, or worse, dimly aware of our mortality, all this dimly, and that dimension mostly we try to suppress. We're only when forced to confront that dimension do we confront that dimension. I'm making spiritual and moral kind of the same, but they could be treated as two different dimensions too. Then at the opposite extreme, I suppose our carnal level of existence, dimly aware that we're sitting in a room eating or drinking or feeling pain or feeling pleasure or feeling sleepy or excited or whatever. Our carnal emotional, notice how those quickly intermingle and are inseparable, and when am I ever carnal? Never. Because the emotions and mind invade all that. You see, but I would say the film makes this kind of explicit. What a work of genius. What a work of genius. And the actors worthy of that, I would say. Anyway, so back to our film. The distress of Henry without Becket, feeling betrayed by Becket, dimly aware, I'm overusing that, but it's always that, dimly aware that it's his own fault that he finds himself in this situation, dissatisfied, irritable with his family, totally scornful of his wife, who was a great woman in history, Eleanor of Aquitaine. God, a giant of a woman. Wow. His wife treated like a like a shrew, an irritable shrew, S-H-R-E-W, in the film, unfortunately. But anyway, drunk, irritable, his four barons, burly Normans, standing there while he's eating and drinking one night, and in his drunkenness he says, famous words, "Will no one rid me of this meddlesome priest?" These are the words that have come down in history. Will no one help me get rid of this meddlesome priest, meddlesome, getting involved in my business, priest, Becket. The four barons look at each other, nod, and leave. And we know, of course, what will happen. This is a famous event in history. They ride all night to Canterbury, of course. In the morning, early in the morning, Becket, as every morning, is at the altar of his church, the great cathedral. This is the old one. It will be rebuilt after his death, saying Mass. He almost expects what happens. He continues Mass. The four men stand at the bottom of the stairs leading up to the altar, and then Becket, when he finishes Mass, says, "What can I do for you, my brothers?" Comes down the stairs, and they kill him. They murder him right there in the church. Whoa! Well, of course, the populace, ACE, populace, is furious at this event. Henry, of course, can do nothing but pretend that he had nothing to do with this, that they killed Becket on acting on their own volition, their own idea. He distances himself, of course, from this murder. And so the four barons, of course, will be put to death. Fools. Or martyrs. Maybe they are martyrs to royal power, because they died really to help Henry get out of his ticklish situation, untenable situation. Anyway, and so the events of the rest of the film lead quickly to where we are at the beginning. Henry, wonderful, wonderful. He's always depicted as having tender, gentle skin. And earlier in the film, a typical scene, he had bathed cold water, there was no warm water, and then one of his servants is supposed to rub his back. "Rub harder, dog, I'm cold," he says, Henry to his servant. And then Becket, who's standing there amused, always amused, they're both amused at each other every second earlier, says, "Here, give it to me." And he rubs vigorously. "Oh, Thomas, only you know what I need. Only you know how to treat me." So this establishes his tender skin. So at the beginning, or is it at the end? It doesn't matter. Henry, feeling the lash of the whip, says, and you, talking to Thomas, dead, of course, in Thomas's church, he says, "So of course, Thomas, you know how tender my skin is. You will appreciate the gesture that I'm submitting to here, this show of penance." Wonderful God. "And you will, of course, smile at the thought that I'm going to destroy this church and build a new, much more magnificent church in its place, and it will be called, it will be sacred to you, Thomas. It will be dedicated to St. Thomas à Becket, who was canonized, I think, in 1177, very quickly after his death. I think the required 5 or 6 years had to pass, but he's one of those, like St. Francis, who was canonized very soon, as quickly as possible after death. Again, if you are cynical, and I am a little bit, you say the church wanted to cash in as quickly as possible while the market was hot. Yes, people, we love St. Francis too, and look, we made him a saint overnight. Beautiful. And very similar. I'm sure Henry paid the Vatican a lot of money, though the Vatican didn't need the money. They wanted that saint too, because St. Thomas à Becket, having a St. Thomas, meant a huge rise in ecclesiastical power in England. Thomas was a warning to kings. Look, don't mess with the church. Don't mess with Mother Church. Beautiful. The politics always amusing and complex, and the giants who play the game, very interesting human beings, of course, if we can appreciate them. Anyway, back to our film. And the film ends with Henry putting his robe back on, his lashed tender skin. No, just a cloak. Going out to the mob, the populace there waiting, and removing the cloak and showing the lashes on his back, but smiling and winking at Thomas the dead Thomas, right, in his heart, saying, "Good joke, huh, Thomas?" My God, what sophistication! What a high level of sophistication and wit and humanity and feeling. It's not cynical. It's cynical and religious at the same time, which is maybe how we should be. I mean, it's in the end, it's kind of religious, or at least it allows the religious perspective. It does not deny the religious perspective at all. But the foremost one is the human one, the complex, deep, rich, funny, cruel range of feelings and behavior that bond two people, in this case the two friends. What a glorious film. We have some time left. I wonder if... Okay, I'm going to talk about one of Shakespeare's most lovable... God, maybe it's his most lovable play. Henry IV, Part 1. It's classed among the chronicle plays or historical plays dealing with English history, but it's so much more. We have relatively little time, but I hope to do it justice. The main characters... Okay, historical background. Richard II was King of England from 1377 to 1397 or 98, around there, around 21 years. But he was a very unpopular king. He was willful. By the way, an excellent play is Richard II. An early play is no match for the play we're doing now. We're doing the great one. But Richard II is an excellent play. Anyway, so... in that play, in Richard II, we see what kind of strange man Richard was, doomed for unpopularity. An unbalanced man, probably homosexual. Okay. In Henry IV, Part 1, what do we have? We have Bolingbroke. Henry Bolingbroke was Duke of Northumberland? Oh God, doesn't matter. A powerful duke. And he had been banished by Richard II, and Richard had taken his lands. But Bolingbroke returns to England. No, I'm telling you more Richard II. Let me get to Henry IV. But that's historical background. Okay. Bolingbroke returned to England, returned up to York, and slowly marched south to London, and as he marched south, he was joined by thousands who disliked Richard, and by the time he arrived in London, Richard could not oppose him. In fact, Richard had to return from Ireland, could not oppose him, and had to submit. Well, this was rebellion. This was unthinkable. And Henry took the throne from Richard. Basically imprisoned Richard in some remote castle, and then apparently had him murdered. Richard was murdered. Richard became a little bit of a martyr himself. But anyway, Henry was on the throne, Henry IV. But Henry's position was a little bit untenable, that is, a little bit precarious. Could easily be tipped over, and he felt that constantly. And he felt guilty about the snatching of the throne and the murder of Richard, and this guilt unbalanced him a little bit. Anyway, now to our play. The main character, the central character, is Prince Hal. Hal is the older son of Bolingbroke. That is, he is the Prince of Wales, meaning he is the heir to the throne, H-E-I-R. He will be the next king. He will be Henry V. And for Shakespeare and for many Englishmen, Henry V was the most glorious of the kings of the past. His reign was brief, but he was a hero of the 100 Years' War against France. He was a dashing man, charming, a good king in his brief reign. Okay, Hal. Now, what is Hal doing? How is Hal spending his time? Hal is spending his time drinking and chasing after women, partying, playing elaborate jokes and pranks, stealing even. And his number one friend is one of the giants of Shakespeare. I'm so glad we get to talk about this today. What's his name? Time out. Oh my God. I can't even think of his name. The most comical character in all of Shakespeare. What's it, the giant? Ah. Just 1 second, please. My God, it's scary. Henry VI, Richard III, Richard the first part of Henry IV. Here we go. Falstaff. Oh my God. At those times when I don't remember something that's so obvious, I start to panic, and that prevents me from remembering. Anyway, Falstaff. Falstaff is a very obese, immensely witty man. He is the wittiest creature in literature. Falstaff is the wittiest creature in literature. His wit is... how could Shakespeare encompass him and the other characters? It really exceeds anyone's grasp how that is possible, how it's humanly possible for that man, Shakespeare, to have created Falstaff as well as these other creatures, male and female. Okay, to our point. Falstaff is Sir John Falstaff. He's a knight, but he's a disreputable knight, and he drinks constantly, and every day needs money for his drink. And Hal is pretty generous, but Hal tries to keep some control of him too. And the interplay between these two characters is a treasure. The butt of the jokes, the objects of most of the humor is Falstaff. But Falstaff is very witty about himself too, and Falstaff can give back just as well as he takes. I'll tell you about a scene, and then we have to expand to the political goings-on. In the most delicious scene of all, Hal, Falstaff, and their other guys, Poins, and there's a group of about 6 or 7 of them, are in an inn where they spend a lot of their time drinking and so forth, and clowning. And Hal has just received word that his father, Henry IV, wants to see him tomorrow at Windsor Castle, I think. And so, we better prepare for this. And so, immortal scene. Okay, Falstaff has the idea. Okay, Hal, you be Hal, I will be your father, and we will practice this so that you can think about what you're going to say to your father. And, okay, so first Falstaff speaks as Henry. My son, I do marvel at the company you keep. It's so low, it's so vulgar, it's so disgusting. All except one fellow, one outstanding fellow. I think I'm reversing it, but it doesn't matter. I'm sorry. No, I am reversing it. I better stop right there. In the first, Falstaff says, okay, I'll be you, you be your father. And so Hal speaks and he says, what low company you keep, especially that one fellow. What's his name? The fat one. Very witty. But then Falstaff takes over, and Falstaff steals completely, outwits Hal completely. And then Hal says, okay, well, wait, let's reverse roles. Now you, Falstaff, be my father, and I will be myself. And then the way I told you before happens. But Falstaff says, yes, he's the king now. It's hard to keep this straight. He's the king. So Falstaff is the king. Yes, I marvel at the low company you keep, my lad, but one fellow seems to be outstanding. He is martially noble, that is, he's a brave soldier, he's valiant, he's witty, and at the end of this speech, it rises to such a height, and Falstaff, says, hang all the others, but keep that fellow Falstaff. We get a glimpse here of high drama, because what this really means is Falstaff knows that one day, of course he knows that one day, Hal will be king. And Falstaff must be feeling a little bit of anxiety, because what will King Henry, King Hal, Henry V, do about his past friends? Will he treat them well, raise them to high positions? No, he can't. Will he put them to death? Possible. What will he do? And so the uncertainty of the future looms before him in a deep, deep way. And there's a kind of desperation in Falstaff's final speech of this delicious scene where he says, hang all the rest of these drunken fools, these thieves, these cut purses. But that fellow Falstaff, keep him. He's the best. He's the best. Wow. Just then, knock on the door. Okay, now I have to take you back to what's been happening. The historical situation is this. When Henry IV, Northumberland, if that's his name, had come to get his power, he had depended for his help on various other powerful figures from the northern England. Among these were the family of Hotspur, Worcester, his brother, and anyway, I won't get into the details of these characters, but Hotspur is he's presented as a young man. At the time he was 40, but Shakespeare makes it more like 25. He's married. He's a hot-headed, great fighter, but hot-tempered man. And he and his father and his uncle had been the main supporters of Henry and made Henry the king. But now they think that Henry is ungrateful to them. They think that Henry has not repaid them at all. In fact, Henry doesn't trust them. And they're right. So this is a very ticklish, sensitive political situation. And their grievances, the grievances of Hotspur, his father and his uncle, have become so great that they are going to mount an armed rebellion against Henry IV. And already Hotspur has made war in Scotland against the Douglas, as he's called, the Earl of Douglas, I'm pretty sure is his name, who is a great warrior, Scottish warrior himself, and Hotspur has defeated Douglas twice. But these are warriors, fighters, athletes, so to speak, and the fellowship among them is almost as great as their sense of rivalry. And now the Douglas has agreed to join Hotspur and his father and uncle. And together they represent a huge, a formidable, and very threatening force that will come down on King Henry. And Henry can match them, but it will be close. Now Henry is feeling the need of calling on his son, Hal. And so that's why he has said, come tomorrow morning, talk with me. And so right in the center of the play, right in the middle of Act 3, I think, we get this wonderful scene of Henry and Hal, literally the scene. And the scene is serious. The king weeping, saying, I'm so embarrassed, I'm so humiliated at your ways, at your doings. Flashback. Early in the play, in Act 1, we get a soliloquy. Sorry, but this is okay. We get a soliloquy by Hal. And Hal says to us, speaking to himself, really, I'm just playing a game here. I'm amusing myself. But when my time comes, when I'm called to more serious things, when I will be a king, I promise I will be a great king. And no one will ever see this playful, boyish, reveling, dissolute lad whom I am now. It's just a mask. Don't worry. Well, it's a shame. It's the weakest part of the play, but Shakespeare had to do it. returning now to Hal and his father Henry. Why are you this way? And Hal basically says, I'm sorry I've been this way. I'm sorry I've embarrassed you. But you can count on me fully. And you can count on me to oppose Hotspur. I'll fight him one-on-one if you want. And I will defeat him. And I will bring honor to you and to myself. Powerful, powerful. Very unconvincingly, though, Henry then says, wow, you're my son. I give you all the power. Go do whatever you want and fight them. Just a total 180-degree reversal. But one has to believe it. That part of the play is the weakest part of the play. But these characters. There's another character among the rebels, and he is Owen Glendower. Owen Glendower is a Welshman, a warrior, a great fighter, and he too has been defeated by Hotspur. And Glendower's daughter he has given in marriage to Hotspur, to a relative of Hotspur's. Oh, what's his name? Maybe I can find it. Hotspur, Douglas, Worcester. Blah, blah, blah. Give me 1 second because it's a little bit important. Mortimer. And he's among the rebels too. Well, it's wonderful because, by the way, there's a perfect dovetailing here. I said to you before that the Welsh woman in Becket, the film, the mistress of Becket, would sing these beautiful songs in Welsh, and she was so wonderful. Glendower's daughter also sings, that's where we get this idea for the film. Glendower's daughter sings in Welsh. She's beautiful, she must be, and her music beautiful, to Mortimer, her husband, who doesn't understand anything, though he says, I must learn Welsh. I must learn what this wonderful creature is singing because it's so beautiful. The link between the film and the play, here it is. It's not big, but it's powerful. It's wonderful. Okay, here we go. So, things start moving. Falstaff, too, will take part in all this, and he gets a job recruiting soldiers. Now, the way the game was played was, Hal gives Falstaff $10,000. Let's make dollars. And Falstaff's job is to recruit fellows, buy money, give them money, to make them soldiers. Well, Falstaff very cynically chooses the poorest of the poor, fellows without a shirt or rags, the homeless, to whom, of course, he can give $5 here, $5 there. They don't have $5. They'll join right away. But this, of course, will be Falstaff's way of keeping 8,000, let's say, of the 10,000. That dog, that rogue. Everyone knows it because this was common. But it's kind of cynical of Falstaff. And he says very witty speeches about it. And Hal, although it irritates Hal a little bit, Hal is also amused by it because he's amused by everything that Falstaff says, for the time being, temporarily, tentatively. So anyway, then in Act 4 we get the long march up to the battle. What's the name of that battle? Sorry, but it's a little bit important. Well, the second part, first part. What's the name of the battle? Where are we? Sorry, I want the name of the battle. A little bit important. Oh wow, wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. Don't find it yet, but it doesn't matter. I'll find it. Act 5, of course, will be the battle, and the culmination, the climax of everything, will be the individual combat between Hal and Hotspur. And of course, Hal will win. But this is punctuated with delicious humor. Falstaff finds himself on the battlefield. Probably the real Falstaff, because he was real, was a pretty good fighter, but our Falstaff is not a fighter at all. I'm going to tell the battle scene, and then I'll tell an earlier scene. Just wonderful. Hotspur comes looking at him. Fight, dog. They fight briefly, and then Falstaff falls down and pretends to be dead. pretends to be dead. And when Hotspur is gone, he wakes up and explains to us, basically, better a live hero than a live coward than a dead hero. He doesn't want to be a dead hero. How do dead heroes benefit? Do they get a financial reward? Do they benefit in any way? No. Delicious, delicious speech about it's being better to be a live coward than a dead hero. And then even after Hal kills Hotspur, then Hal moves on. Then Falstaff goes and takes Hotspur's armor or something, his shield or something, and then claims that he killed Hotspur. He explains that Hal went moving on, but then Hotspur got up. He was not dead. He was living. And Falstaff, killed him. Sorry. 5 minutes? Good. Okay. Now, reverting to an earlier scene. Delicious. This is about Act 1, Act 2. When the boys, Hal, Falstaff, and the others are playing pranks. Hal comes and tells Falstaff and the others that a man will be carrying a lot of money from London to somewhere, and he will have to pass through the woods near where they are. They will rob him of that money. They need money. Great. And then they all agree to meet someplace in the woods that night. But then Hal explains to Ned Poins, his friend, a little higher class than these others, this is all a joke, because we will take the money and we'll return it later, but the joke will be on Falstaff, because Falstaff will take the money. That's it. Falstaff will steal the money, but then we will steal the money from Falstaff, and the joke will be that we too will take the money from those 5, but then later when we meet, we'll ask, what happened? We will be disguised. We, Hal and Poins, will be disguised. And later when we ask Falstaff what happened, the joke will be Falstaff's lies, because Falstaff will claim that they were attacked by 50, 100, 200, that Falstaff, killed 50 of them, but finally had to yield, when really it's only 2 who are taking the money from Falstaff. Well, the wit is wonderful, unparalleled, unequalable. The wit of Henry IV Part 1 is unbeatable in any of the comedies. None of the comedies is as witty, as wonderful, as memorable as Henry IV Part 1, which of course is not a comedy. It's not a tragedy either. It's a chronicle play. In the end, Hal has, of course, defeated the enemy. Peace is in England, and everyone realizes that Hal will be a great king. After this play, we have Henry IV Part 2, when Henry IV dies and Hal becomes king. And after that, we get Henry V, and then we get Henry VI Part 1, 2, 3. All these 6 plays form 2 trilogies in a sense. Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2. Then we get Henry V. It must be 2 tetralogies. It's 8 plays. At the heart of Shakespeare's works, really. Richard II. Oh yeah, got it. Richard II, Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, Henry V. Then Henry VI Part 1, 2, 3, and Richard III. These form a historical sequence in the heart of Shakespeare's history works, and the hero of that whole series is Hal, who dominates Henry IV Part 1, Henry IV Part 2, and of course Henry V. And then he'll die. Okay, good enough. Thank you.